I'd have to look it up, and I will look it up for you, and I will let you know. On another, at another time, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Sorry. It's a real big cop out. Like, don't use that, but I'm not gonna tell you what to use. Okay. So, Ben, would you go ahead and read for us?
Yeah. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, what is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets.
Okay, excellent. Sam.
One of the scribes approached. When he heard them debating and saw that Jesus answered them well, he asked him, which command is the most important of all? Jesus answered, the most important is, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other command greater than these. And to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is far more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices.
Okay, Sam.
He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay. And then let me read from Matthew 7:12. Matthew 7:12 says, therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Jonathan?
For this, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, it is summed up in the saying, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law.
And then I'm going to read from Galatians 5:13 and 14. For you, brethren, you have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so the first four came from
The Gospels.
specifically from Jesus. The second two came from Romans and Galatians, so they came from Paul, okay? And I'm going to step over this later, I'm going to trip over it, and so you can remind me that I was foolish, okay? So what do all of these verses basically say?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. Right, there's the little song, there you go here right now, love God and love people, right? So basically, in the passage that Ben read, sorry, I don't know why I have song on my, the passage that Ben read, basically, Jesus is saying all the laws come down to this, right? And then Sam read, all the laws come down to this. And then Sam read, all the laws come down to this, right? Love God and love your neighbor. But then in the one that I read in Matthew 7:12, when it really comes down, he says, love others, like do for others. And then we read from Paul, who, gives a lot of good information. And what does Paul say? All the law comes down to,
Love others.
yeah, love God, love others, but really, really love others. So I think that it is especially fitting when we're looking at decision-making in the will of God. Like ultimately, we cannot get away from the idea that it is God's will that we
Love others.
like we are called to love God. And I don't believe that as a Christian, that you can be truly a Christian if you don't love God. Can you truly be a Christian if you don't love others? I want to share this. Oh, I'm supposed to pray there. Sorry. I have a PowerPoint. We'll use it later. Let's just take a few minutes and just pray about those ideas. Does anybody have any thoughts about that or any?
Because we have the verse that says, if you don't love your brother, then you don't love me.
Mm-hmm. I've always thought that was interesting because it's not, if you don't love me, you won't love your brother, right? It's that is really convicting, right? It's really easy to say the people that annoy you or that irritate you, right? You have a brother, you know.
Yeah.
He's not here, so we can pretend like he's the annoying one, right? Were you gonna say something, Sam? Sorry.
A lot of times I think I'm more annoying than he is.
You're just helping him to show his love for God more, right? It's very selfless of you. So let's just pray. Lord God, thank you that you reveal your will to us. God, I thank you that you have a plan and a purpose for each of our lives. God, we thank you that nothing is wasted if we surrender it to you. So Lord, I just ask that you would just give us wisdom, help us to seek you, help us to not discount your word based on our feelings or based on what this world tells us. But God, I pray that you would just help us to see and to focus on you. In your name we pray. Amen. So I want to share this video, and it is for a missionary I don't know. But I was really impacted by this video, and I think this is the right one.
A lot of times I said, how do you know that you were called to be a missionary? And for me, my thought was, if this is real, why am I going to do anything else with my life? I mean, if I really believe, when I say I believe, why am I going to waste my time doing anything else? I'll do anything. And what was crazy is I still had that attitude. I'll do anything. I don't care. I'll do it for Jesus. I didn't particularly feel called to this life. I didn't feel called to live in a hammock or to sweat every waking moment of your life or to be in situations that are dirty and filthy. I never planned on being with people that were undereducated. And we rode up into this village that we'd not even planned on visiting. And we rode into the village, and when we got there were 3 old women that were there waiting on us. And one of these women was just tears rolling down her eyes. And she looked at me and she said, because when we were little girls, we became Christians in our village, and their village was all the way in another province. And so we became Christians in that village, and there was a church there, but our husbands came and they took us and they brought us here, and we don't have a Bible. We do not have any other Christians around. There's no one else around. And so we have been praying. The 3 of us have been praying for 20 years for God to send somebody. I'm laying there and I'm praying and I'm saying, God, I know that you have someone. And I was praying Luke 10:2. I said, God, send laborers in the harvest field. Lord, send workers, send people to come and plant churches among these people. God, send a man, send a woman, send young people. But God asked me one question. He said, but if you don't, then who will? He said, you've seen the sights, you've seen the sounds, you see the need, and if you don't do it, then who am I going to get to do it? That was in 1998, and I said, okay, God, I'll do it. And in 2000, what was crazy is I met Leah. I remember thinking to myself, God, I'm this close to getting married. I will not tell her that I'm called to the jungle because she will never marry me. I feel like God just said, you don't have to, I'm telling her. And that day, I'm in one village and she's in another village. And when I get into that village, I'm looking around and I know that's where my heart is. And God says, I'm telling her right now. And I remember walking back into a hotel room that night. And when I walked into the hotel room, she's sitting on the edge of the bed. And she said, I need to tell you something. I said, no, let me tell you. God told you that we need to move here and that we're supposed to reach the shore people. And she starts crying. I said, yes, that's what we're going to do. You know, so many times we live our life wondering if we're called to do something. And I think it's the wrong question to ask. I think the question that we have to ask, are we not called to do something? Because I think Jesus was pretty clear. We're called. We don't have an option. We cannot deny the Great Commission. We have to do something. The need is the call. And we got to respond. We're so concerned about getting all of our ducks in a row. Those people that are waiting to do that are never going to do anything for God. Realistically, the burning bush only comes to tell us not to do something. And anything else, guess what we have to do? We have to respond. God doesn't have a plan B. He has one plan, and we're all part of it. Stop trying to get everything, all your ducks in a row and make it all happen. Stop trying to have all the answers. If you don't want me to do this, then send me a burning bush. If you don't want me to respond to this need, tell me that, Lord. Tell me that. Some of you have pretext for obedience. You know what that means? That means you say, okay, God, when I have this much money, and when I have this, and when I have that, and when I have this, then I'm going to do something for you. Partial obedience, complete disobedience. When we obey God partially in our lives, it's the same as if we were totally disobedient to the Lord. What are the things you're trying to get in order so that God can use you? I'm just ignorant enough to believe that if He says it, then I can do it. It doesn't mean I'm going to have success, but it means I'm going to have His blessing, which is much more important than success.
I'm gonna come back. Please, stop.
Are we not called to do something? Called to do something. And I think it's the wrong question to ask. I think the question that we have to ask, are we not called to do something?
And what are your thoughts on that? How would you respond to that?
It's got a good point.
Amen.
The idea of like putting out a fleece or like the burning bush, or have you ever thought about that as in praying about like a clear answer to not, or are you always praying on the other side, like a clear answer to? I thought a lot of the things that he said in here are really profound and caused me to think a little bit differently. Any other thoughts from this you want to pull out before we?
I just find it interesting about, the success part,
Mm-hmm.
and how that's always, because I'll just refer to my own, because I'm an American, and I grew up in America, and I grew up in you're self-made,
Beautiful.
that is what you have to be. You know, you have to be successful. But, it's called, I mean, you know, not every prophet in the Old Testament was successful in our terms.
Right, and this, what he says, like, you may not have success, but you'll have God's blessing. And so the prophets, like if you look, you would say, perhaps not super successful. If you look at the disciples, the ends of most of their lives, you might say, not super successful.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand there's a concept where you can, even if God hasn't asked you to do something, that you can do something as long as it's not against his word or what he's called you to, and dedicate it to him, and he will still honor what you're doing. And you, like Ben said, like even if it isn't a success, you're doing it for his purposes and for his glory, and even if it's not a direct thing that he has told you to do, you can still do those things for him. Like there was a circumstance where this girl wanted to make a commitment to God for a whole year, and her roommate had made a similar commitment a year earlier, but then not held true to that commitment. And so she was telling her, well, you don't want to do that because like God might change your plans. But I disagree, because I think if she wanted to make that commitment to God and it wasn't going to mess with his word or something that he had already called her to, that he would honor that commitment she was going to make. I think some people miss that idea.
I think sometimes we get so, I could say, like just as an example, like I could say I am called to international missions. And I know people who are called to international missions and they end up, I mean, I can think of more than one person who didn't want to come back to the US and do fundraising and visit churches. They didn't see that as the ministry they were called to. And so they decided to leave their organization, to do several things and to go independently. And so that they could just stay where they were called. And I know one person where God just blessed that. And I know another example where it appeared that God just removed his blessing from that. Now I'm not saying that either was incorrect, because again, like I don't know if God removed his blessing. But I also strongly believe that there are seasons and in our lives, and that I can be called to one specific thing, but it doesn't excuse me from everything else. Like it doesn't excuse, I'm called to international mission service, so when I'm in America, I don't have to be kind. Right? It doesn't take away any of the biblical mandates. It doesn't take away the fruit of the Spirit. Like I would hope and pray that the Holy Spirit is with me as long as I am not in disobedience. The Holy Spirit should be evidenced in my life. I don't know what happened, but it came back, so it's okay. And I seemed to carry on quite well while I was fixing it, but then as soon as it came back, I lost my train of thought. Like I was doing so well, I was so proud of myself. Oh, so sorry. Okay. And I just want to point you to that couple that we just watched their video. The website is junglemissionary.com, and they are pioneer missionaries. Okay. now I'm gonna switch. If I were, sorry, I could have put these on the same, but I didn't, and so this is how it looks today. Boy. So these are those verses that we started with, in case you wanted to get them down, if you wanted to look at them later. I mean, you could find them, but it's not. I think that for me, if I share just about my call, I felt God asking me to serve him more. I was involved in my church. I was leading a youth group and involved in a small group, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough. God was asking me to do more, and prayed about that and was seeking how to do more for almost a year before I was told about a job at World Gospel Missions headquarters in Indiana, which is where I'm from. And I heard about a job and applied for it, and I thought, I'm not qualified. At that point, I hadn't finished my undergrad degree. Decided I had been in school and decided that if I continued to go for a teaching degree that I wouldn't like children anymore. And so I was working at a convenience store, a small store, and they had offered me a management position. And I realized I would make more as an assistant manager than I would as a teacher. And I thought, maybe this is the way to go. And was quickly promoted to a store manager, and I was being successful. I was their youngest store manager. I was getting bonuses and all these things. And God just really started speaking to me about succeeding at things that didn't matter. And just started praying, like, God, what can I do that would have an eternal impact? And so just couldn't get involved enough in church. A friend told me about this job, and I thought, I'm not qualified. I hadn't worked in an office. I didn't have a degree. There were just so many reasons I wasn't qualified. But it was like, no, I'm supposed to apply for this job. So I got the application, and by the time I did it, I was like, I'm gonna work there. I don't really know why they're gonna hire me, but it's gonna happen. And I mean, and I had connections with World Gospel Mission before, and I knew some people, and but by the time I had my interview, the day that I was supposed to have the interview, I woke up in the morning and I had, never happened before, but I had an abscessed tooth. So woke up about 4 a.m. with the worst pain I'd ever experienced, and the whole side of my face was swollen. And I thought, honestly, this is not of the Lord. This is Satan. So I called my dentist. I went to the dentist. They did terrible procedures that made me cry. And I finished at the appointment at the dentist, and I don't even remember, but a few minutes before my interview was supposed to happen. Because I was like, I'm not going to call and cancel, I'm going to go. I'm not going to call and cancel, I'm going to go. And so I drove to World Gospel Mission in sweatpants. I'm not even going to lie, I just been to the dentist in terrible pain. I drove in sweatpants and I'm sure my hair was lovely. And I went in, my face is still swollen, I'm in this terrible pain. And I went in because it was I have to have this job. I was so convinced that God had opened that door that I couldn't call and cancel. And so I went in. Do you remember Todd Eckhart?
Maybe.
He was the supervisor. So I went in to the secretary and I was like, hi, I have an interview. And she's like, I'm sure she thought, well, I know she thought, because she told me later, you look rough, lady. And so the supervisor called me in. He's like, hi. And I was like, hi, here's the thing. This happened this morning. I'm in terrible pain, but I really believe that God wants me to work here. So I came. But if we could do this on another day. And he said, absolutely, was very gracious. He let me go home. I came back and did an interview, and God had not told him that he was going to hire me. He had already selected the person he was going to hire, and it was not me based on the application. And he told me after, if I had just called, then I would not have gotten the job. Like, they would have rescheduled, they would have gone ahead and hired the other person. They did hire the other person for a different job, but they hired me for that job because when I came in looking rough and terrible, saying like I had to come because like God said this was the place for me. He was like, he said that like God just gave him a piece, like she's the one, which is crazy. I would not advocate that. But like I have had places in my life that it was that clear. So I started working at World Gospel Mission in their, the department that sent people out. And I coordinated their short-term teams, their short-term trips. And I loved missions and I loved missionaries, but I didn't believe God could use me that way. I think that I had this mindset, this picture of what a missionary looked like. And with my background, my testimony, like I knew God had saved me, but I didn't think, like who would pick me as a missionary? Like nobody. And so over that, the 3 years I worked at WJM headquarters, God grew me and he helped me to see what missions looks like and what missionaries really look like and how God could use me. And so I went on a couple short-term trips and then I went to Ukraine and I was in Ukraine for 2 weeks, and it was the longest I'd ever been away from home. 2 weeks. And I got to the end of the 2 weeks, and I didn't know, 2 weeks seemed like a really long time to be away. I got to the end of the 2 weeks, and I went down to the beach. We were on the sea, and I was praying in the morning because I couldn't believe that the 2 weeks had passed so quickly. And I was praying and I just was saying to the Lord, like maybe I could maybe I could be a missionary. Like this is what you wanted me to do. If you wanted me to be a missionary, like kind of like we could talk about it. and it was like God said, here, Shushan, and I just had a peace. And I came away from that thinking, oh, that's not what I wanted. And I didn't know what here meant because that was scary. But like I came back and I couldn't get away from that. Everything pointed me to Ukraine. I had the opportunity, it's so crazy because now I've been to Papua New Guinea, but I had the opportunity to go to Papua New Guinea. Typically like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. There was a team going, they needed another female adult because they had a teen girl going and it was just men. And so they needed another female and I qualified. And so I could go, the church was like, I wasn't gonna have to pay to go. And I was like, I'd really rather go to Ukraine. And so one of my colleagues went instead, and it was amazing. And at first I thought, why didn't I want to go? And it wasn't that I didn't want to go, it was just so clear. Like God is in Ukraine, and I couldn't get away from it. So I think that like sometimes, like in the call, and obviously I'm not in Ukraine today. So one of the questions like from the book that when we were reading, kind of the question is, what are we called to? Or where are we called to? Can you be called to a geographic location? Are you called to, what are you called to? What do you think?
I know that I'm called to full-time ministry. And that's not to say that I might not have to work another job or something like that, but I just know that that's what I want the purpose of my life to be. I think I mentioned this before, that I even kind of felt that from the video, there's nothing else that I can do. And I don't know what that means. I don't know I obviously have a passion and a heart for missions. That's kind of the direction that I'm going in. But if God made a clear call, I would go towards that call. But He hasn't really given me that clear thing, except I just know in my heart that ministry and missions is where my heart is. And I don't feel like I could glorify God in any other way than just giving everything to Him and to His ministry. That's kind of where I'm at.
I feel like I'm just called to serve wherever I'm at, whatever capacity that I can. God has given me I don't know, like a tendency just to help people whenever I see the need for help or to do something that needs to be done. Still, like, I guess I just do it out of compulsion, but I want to be sure that my heart is behind it and that God's actually leading and I'm doing it out of love, not of necessity.
Sorry, I'm just making notes because it helps me to know how to pray for you guys. And because I sometimes forget these things. You have thoughts? It doesn't have to be about like what you would express as like your specific call, but about calls in general.
I just, so my pastor keeps asking me, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And in my early, more immature years in Christ, I would have probably thought, well, let's say something very wordy and something that's very lofty and that kind of stuff. But now, I've just kind of decided that all that just falls. I mean, it's just, unless it's coming from the heart, there's never one to say it. But oftentimes I feel like people want some grand response. And I've just said I'm just open. I'm open, to whatever the Lord calls me. I do feel like it's ministry in some forms and fashions, and I believe that comes in various degrees, and it's just similar to what Jonathan and Samantha both have said. You just feel that, I just feel that it's supposed to be doing more than what I'm doing. It's very interesting that Mr. Lorimer had that message over, Voice of One. I remember reading that. I think it was like in 2015, probably before my car wreck. I'm reading that scripture, and just overwhelmingly about John the Baptist, just reading that, and then just overwhelmingly sitting in my bed thinking, like, this Spirit speaking and ministering to me. It's like convicting me even. It's like, this is more about what I'm calling you to than what you think. Like, you think it looks this way, you think it looks that way, but like, I'm just asking you to be just, a voice for me. And I've really felt that, and that was renewed when he shared that message with us. And I'm just gonna keep rambling on this stuff.
Sam, do you have thoughts?
I just feel like it's just like I wrote on my paper, like complete surrender to Him, and let God use you, despite even though you don't have like a specific calling, or for God to just use you and to be patient on it, and I mean, wherever you go, you can witness and be a light to people. So, yeah, that's all I have.
In our book, this one, the Encountering Missions, on page My book's coming apart. On page 55, under talking about the missionary call, down about, so under missionary call, second paragraph, one of the things that it talks about, seldom do churches refer to secular vocations such as a teacher, business person, doctor, nurse, homemaker, lawyer, politician, or mechanic in relation to a call. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. Being at KBC, I've met people who God has called them to be a police officer or called them to a job like that. But at the churches that I've been a part of, I don't really know of many people that would consider their secular job their call. It's just like they do it and then they go to church kind of thing. Like, not to say that they're stagnant Christians or that they don't have a real relationship with Jesus, but I just don't think they consider, and some of them probably do, but I don't feel like it's talked about a lot that that's kind of their call.
Mm-hmm.
Or that their mission field within their job or something.
So do you think, go ahead.
She said it all.
So then we think about if we separate like our vocation, so a call can be a vocation, but it doesn't have to be a vocation, right? So I could be called to be a teacher, or I could just be a teacher. So if I'm not called to a vocation, I'm not called to be a pastor, I'm not called to, what other things have you heard people express a call to? Or what other things do you think people can be called to?
Something I experienced when I was in Cuba that was different than I'd ever seen is this guy who was our translator was getting his master's in microbiology, but that was just his job. And he was called to teaching in his church and called to be a translator, and like what his life purpose was for him was the work that he did with his church and the work that he did for Christ, but his job was just his job, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't really know if that's kind of what you're referring to, but he really felt a call to ministry, but he still had the thing that he did to earn a living, I guess. And I know that he used that as a ministry as well, but like there were days where he would spend like 12 hours with us and then go home at 10 p.m. and work on his thesis. Like, you could tell where his priorities were, even though he had that other job.
Anybody have some thoughts about that, or? Have you ever heard someone say, I'm called to be a wife? Have you ever heard guys say, I'm called to be a father?
I haven't.
I'm gonna say I want to.
I've definitely heard women say that more, but I have known men to have the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever heard a man say he's called to be a husband, but I have heard called to be a dad.
What do you think about that, like those ideas?
I don't know what I think.
What do you think?
I don't know what
Oh, I think you said, I know what I think. I was like, do you want to share them with others, or are they secrets?
I have lots of thoughts always, but I don't want to be the first person to talk.
I mean, I wasn't called to be a sister, but I am one. Right? So are there certain roles outside of vocation? That's really what I'm trying to ask, if I'm not saying it clearly. Are there roles outside of vocations that people can be called to? Because I do hear it more with girls. I have heard more than one person say, I was called to KMBC because God has called me to be a pastor's wife. I think, interesting. So have you met the pastor yet? And I'm not lying. I'm not making that up. I wish I were a little bit, to my heart.
Thankfully, I've only known like 2 people that say that since I've been here. But then they kind of change their mind when they like somebody else. So I don't know if that's a real call.
But so, what are your thoughts? Like, can you be called to a role? If you can be called to a vocation, can you be called to a role? Or do you think roles are different? Like, all men are created in the image of God and given the same commands about roles. So you're not called to, and the same is true for women. All women are created in the image of God and we're given clear directions. And so those roles, can those roles be a call or no?
In the sense that, like for example, if you feel called to be a father, then what are you doing to prepare yourself for that? That could be your call for your role, and your life would be leading up to that point, just preparing yourself for that.
Mhm.
I think maybe if someone's called to be a mother, that call might not just be for her own children. Like it could be used for something else in the future, whether that's taking kids in or working at an orphanage or something like that, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
The role doesn't have to just be a little tiny box of what that means.
Mhm. And so I think that it goes back to some of, I got it used. But I think that that goes back to some of what we're reading in here about discerning, like the will of God and God's call. And I think that it is, sorry, oh, I don't have that phone. I thought it came up on that screen, but it's this computer. I think that that's where we see a lot of the, like you're saying, the preparation and the recognizing, like seeking God's will, right? Those steps that we talked about, well, that was in my last PowerPoint, but the steps, the 8 from page 53, sidebar 3.1, kind of those 8 wisdom signs for discovering God's will. And I think that, I mean, we can, it doesn't necessarily have to be a call for it to be God's will. Like it doesn't have to be that clear call. In some ways, we could almost argue that the idea of a call, like in the video, the call is kind of like a bonus. It's not a requirement. I think that even if you're not called to be a mother, if you are a mother, there are clear directions. Even if you're not called to be a husband, you can't, if you become a husband, if you choose to do that, then you need to, there's a standard that you need to be accountable to, right? I want to go ahead and skip, let's go back to this, no, this way. So in the book, pages, what, page 56, page 56, 57, it talks about the call of some of these people. The call of Moses, and that's where we do have like the burning bush experience. And Moses, who immediately said, oh, of course I'll go, right? You know the story of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And he had lots of excuses as to why he couldn't go, why he wasn't qualified. And then we know the story of Samuel. And when he was called, he immediately jumped up and responded to God, right? But he didn't understand the call, right? He thought it was the priest calling to him, not God. Like he didn't recognize the voice of God when he called. And then we think about Isaiah. And in Isaiah, God is saying, who shall I send? Yep. And Isaiah's like, dude, don't look any further. You don't need a prophet for this. I got it. Right? When we think about Amos, and we think about Jonah, we think about these calls that were perhaps not people who were by world standards qualified or willing, and yet they went. And then we think about the people who were called by Jesus. What kind of people did Jesus call?
Tax collectors,
Mm-hmm.
fishermen.
The lowest low of society.
Yeah. Like he didn't call the kind of the religious leaders of the day, which is interesting that then Paul, right? Paul was commissioned. But if you think about, I mean, there are a lot of things to think about there, but Jesus was a biblical scholar. We can say that, right? Like he knew the stuff, even when he was, yeah, he was kind of, there for the writing. Oh wait, he is the Word, right? And so with the disciples who had been with Jesus, you have those who were with Jesus and experienced his teaching, but perhaps didn't have all of the training in the law. And so in some ways, Paul, who knew the scriptures and had all of that training, kind of stepped into that role as the teacher. And a lot of what we have today, the beginning comes from Jesus, and then Jesus through Paul, who had that training. So God uses different people in different ways, right? I mean, we see John also wrote amazing revelations that clearly did not come from his previous education or training. Right? So it's very interesting. Sometimes I know in my story, in my life, I thought that I could not, or God wouldn't choose to use me because I could limit it. I could say all the reasons that I wasn't the best choice. Thoughts on those who were called by Jesus? I want to come back to, there's this quote, it was in the list of quotes that I gave you. And it's by William Booth, the founder of Salvation Army. And I'll let John, did you want to read it for us?
Not called, did you say? Not heard the call, I think you should say. Put your ear down to the Bible and hear him bid you go and pull sinners out of the fire of sin. Put your ear down to the burdened, agonized heart of humanity and listen for its pitiful wail for help. Go stand by the gates of hell and hear the damned entreat you to go to their Father's house and bid their brothers and sisters and servants and masters not to come there. Then look Christ in the face, whose mercy you have professed to obey, and tell him whether you will join heart and soul and body and circumstances in the march to publish his mercy to the world.
Thoughts?
It's convicting.
It's one of those quotes that's kind of like, what are we doing? Why are we going right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's this, like Sam said, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And then like, I talk to other people who are Christians, and I talk to them about missions. I talk to them just about different things and mission, even just like in their own community and that kind of stuff. And not that I'm perfect and I do everything, but And, cause I don't, obviously, because the Lord's calling you to do more, but it frustrates me, like that quote is something that's like the Holy Spirit witnesses inside of me. And it frustrates me to hear responses from other people and say, yeah, I just don't think that's for me. I just don't think that's for me. I think that's for somebody else, or I think I think the Lord might use me another way, or I'd starve if I went there. Or
Yeah.
I'm not called, I have a connection. And like it really, like that quote, I hear that and like I really feel that. And when I hear others, other professing Christians say all these different things, it's just like, you're saying that to me, but right now, but are you saying, but really you're saying that to Jesus, and I'm not, like you're really saying it, like that's the way I feel inside. I'm like, oh my, because I've done it my own self. I've said no and realized, oh, I've got to go, I don't know if I needed to say that, but I did.
It is, I think that it comes back to the love God and love your neighbor. If you don't truly love anyone who isn't saved, why do you need to go? And in our churches in America, one of the greatest disservices that I think that we do, sometimes we preach people into heaven, right? Anyone whose grandmother has died, like, oh, but she's with Jesus now. How can you make that assumption? I mean, I'm not saying that you can't, if someone is, you see a godly woman in the church who passes away, I'm not saying that you should never say, oh, she's with Jesus. But not everybody's grandma is in heaven. And that assumption, anyone who dies in America, it's like we offer that as like a piece of comfort. And if all people go to heaven, if we can sit back and deceive ourselves into believing that, my younger brother was killed. And there is very, very little reason to hope that he is in heaven. Very little reason. But I am the only person in my family, and I truly believe that with my whole heart. I'm the only person in my family who has struggled with that. And I believed when my brother was killed, I believed that this was going to be a turning point in my family. I believed that, like, my stepmom, I believed my dad, I believed everybody was going to come to Jesus. Like, really, I was like, that's going to be the good that comes of this, Lord. That was my only comfort in this picturing. And I preached my brother's funeral, and I did it because I could picture my brother, like, crying out, like, tell my brothers not to come here. Go to my father's house. And I believed with my whole heart it was going to be the turning point. But the truth is, my family is worse today than they were before, because they have allowed my brother's death to become an excuse for even worse behavior. And I believe with my whole heart that every time one of my nieces talks about my brother being in heaven, like, I believe that it is, I don't say, what? No way. But I ask them, say, what evidence do you have of that? Help me understand. I want to believe that too. Help me understand why you believe that. Because I understand the desire to believe that, But it is such a dangerous thing that is happening in the American church. And if you don't see people in the world as potentially eternally separated from God, facing punishment for their sin, which are probably not any worse than the sins that you've committed or that you would have committed without Jesus. If you can say, I have been granted this gift and don't have to face the penalty, but I don't care about anybody else facing the penalty. And that's the problem, I believe, not just in the American church, but in the church in 2020, that we have lost sight. There's no urgency. And there's almost like this free pass. And I loved sorry, now I'm just gonna preach. I loved in the video when he talked about the things he wasn't called to. He wasn't called to sleep in a hammock, and he wasn't called to sweat all the time. Like, there are so many things that are uncomfortable and you're probably not going to like. But sadly, self-denial is not preached in the churches. In American churches, we don't talk about self-denial. We don't talk about the things that you have. In America, we're all about our rights. When you become a Christian, you surrender all of those rights to Jesus. And do I have a right to clean water? There are lots and lots of Christians in this world who don't have clean water. Do I have a right to own a car and to go and do whatever I want? I mean, we get so confused and caught up in things that are not, and we say that it's God's will that we have these things. Oh, like, praise the Lord, he gave me this job so I can have all of these things. And perhaps that's not the case. Perhaps he gave us the job so that we can support missions in a different way, or to support a ministry, or to support another family or a person, or like, so often our first, like, we are given a gift and our first response is me. And that's not love God, love your neighbors. Self is easy. But like Dr. Spies was talking about, the sign of maturity is when you can say no to self. I have seen, it's fun to observe twins. It's fun to observe kids. But when you have the same age, anytime you can put kids of the same age together, it's really fun to observe twins. And it's really fun if you, I mean, and I don't mean to like say the Darwin twins are sinners, but
They're carnal.
they're just babies. So the two of them, there's a toy. And one wants the toy and may forget that they want it. But how are they reminded that they want that toy?
The other one has it.
Or they have abandoned it. Like, oh, this is my cup. I love this cup. It's so nice. Oh, look, another cup. I'll go over here. But, and I could be happy with the new cup. I'm not going to touch a cup because, COVID, whatever. But in the real world, I would. But if, while I am drinking from this cup, if someone else touched that cup, oh, good gravy now. And the funny thing is, so it's fun to see it in kids and you can observe it, but when you say like, oh Lord, is there any place in my heart that's like that? And so many times I have been convicted because I realize I have 2 laptops. This one's dying. Just so you know, I bought this one because this one is dying. But do I need 2 laptops? No, are there students in the dorm who don't have a laptop? Why don't I have 2? Okay, one doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the mission. But should the other one belong to me? I don't know. Like, these are things, it seems so silly, and I'm not trying to say you should get tied up in knots over it, but it really is, like, we have to examine ourselves And it needs to happen often. Okay, the end. What's supposed to be happening is not me talking about all this stuff. I trust it was good or beneficial to someone. I wanted to spend a few minutes looking at WGM's website, and we talked about how you're going to do mission sending or church that sends. You're going to do some research on them, and I told you you cannot choose WGM because I'm going to use WGM because it's mine. Sorry, but I just wanted to take a minute and show you from the WGM website the Go page. So you can look at this. Oh, maybe the touch screen doesn't work the same as my touch screen. I really want it to. Does that matter to anyone else?
I feel like it should work.
I feel like it
Just
should work
because you're
too.
on the picture,
Maybe,
because the picture's a slideshow, right? No,
maybe.
Never mind, that arrow's going the other way.
I'm gonna put this back on. We'll use my own instead. Oh. All right, so we're gonna get Go. Move out of the way. I'm gonna move out of the way this way. I don't know how I'm gonna move out of the way. It doesn't matter so much. So you can see the screen, right? So we're gonna go, and then you can see that there are different ways to serve. And you can do a couple different things. You can look at the browse opportunities, or you can come down here and explore places to serve. Now, these are not all the places that WGM is, because some places are what we term creative access. We're going to look at this one right here. We're going to look specifically at Honduras. So if you come to this page, not only do you get, you can see some basic information about, if I move my mouse, can you see it? Yeah. But then I can't move it there. Nope. That was so smart. So you get some basic information about Honduras, you get the field video, and you get a list of people who are currently serving in Honduras. And you can click on, here, let's do the soul climbs because I love them. Not that I don't love other people, I do, I love other people. So you can click on an individual person or a couple or family, and you get a little bit of their story, and then you get about their ministry and their ways to connect with them over here. You can see my mouse. So ways to connect with them, and then any special projects that they're doing. If I come back to this page, back to the Honduras page. So this is the field. So a little bit about the ministry there, the people who are serving there. We have a number of retirees who served in Honduras, and many of whom are still connected or working there. And then we have this with projects. So these are the projects right now in Honduras. So there are schools, there are different, there's some medical things, there are some different things. You can click on the individual project and find out more. You can also come down here, okay, and see specific jobs. So like vocational education. Basically like a job opportunity. It's not just like it is. So sometimes people ask, like maybe don't know what specifically you're called to. You haven't felt, you know you're supposed to go, and you want to find like a place that you might fit. And so one way to do that is not only just exploring agencies, but trying to explore, find out information about different countries, find out information about jobs or placements in different countries. So you can see this is in a particular information about the particular school, about the length of service, their requirement, and what the job actually is, and then how to connect to that. So maintenance workers, youth workers. You can also, if you come back to just the go, so not country specific, you can look at different opportunities. Like if I look at this long-term service, you can see the steps for beginning. So applying and preparing for missionary service with WGM, I mean, we're talking about at least a year. Like the process would take at least a year. From the day you apply till you arrive on the field would be, a year is really pretty minimal. But I can look right here. I can search these opportunities and I can actually, it's kind of like a list of jobs. Now I can, if I want to filter it, I can search by country or region or ministry type. Right here I can do, right? So education or sports ministry, or, so if I know I want to do something in evangelism, I
We
can
work
come.
with that guy
Oh yeah?
at the top, yeah.
What's the thing?
That's Nathaniel. Anthony's right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey. I was like, I don't know, because there are words on his head. Very cool. So for evangelism, for example, so basically what I'm trying to say is you can search by country or region, or you can search by a specific job or job type or ministry type. So here, if I look under evangelism, I can see a couple of opportunities in Hungary and Argentina, Bolivia, Japan, Papua New Guinea. So these ministries, maybe it's not something you've thought about. My friend right here, this sweet lady, my friend Meg, she talks about when she first went to Hungary, she went on a team and she went as an English conversation partner. She didn't go as an English teacher. She didn't feel qualified to teach. She was still a college student. She went as a conversation partner. She can have conversations in English. Sometimes we get so caught up on like we don't have the right skills or we don't have the whatever. But truly, truly, just surrendering what you have, God can use it. And so I would encourage you, if you are a doctor, right there, I would encourage you, if you're still like seeking, like I don't know what the next step is, as you're looking at, you're welcome to look at WGM and look at some of these job openings, look at some of these ministry opportunities. If you want to look shorter term, there are lots of summer opportunities, and hopefully summer 2021, those we'll be sending those out. Hopefully by January, we'll be sending out short-term people again. So I would just encourage you, even if you're not looking yet, to just get an idea. These are some places or some ideas of how I could serve, or sports ministry, or maybe you never thought about being like, you're like, oh, like a coffee house?
My problem is anything at all that I could qualify for, I'd be like, that's where I should go. I'm just like, if I can do that, then I'll do it. But then there's too many options.
You're just too well qualified.
Something.
Well, and so then I would encourage you, like, if you know that missions is the way that you're going to go, then start some of the advice that Dr. Spies gave about having godly counsel. There are people in my life that that have prayed with me about all of my, not all of my, but okay, all of my big decisions. Changing countries is a huge deal. Like going to a new country, taking on a new ministry, it's a big deal. And not that God doesn't hear my prayers, because I truly believe that he does. But I always try to seek from others. And it's amazing to me, just like in the video, God had told the bride to be, God so many times has said the same thing to me as he has told the other people that are praying for me. And when they come to me and they say, Shushan, I think this is, and I say, that's what I think too. Later on, when that thing is really hard, I can say, but I know. And not only it wasn't just my emotions, or I wasn't swayed by, that's really what I wanted to do, right? Because our personal desires, right? We have to keep them in check. We already talked about that. But being able to say, like, no, like this person and I all prayed and we all agreed that this was right. And so when China was hard, or when Georgia fell apart, when all of those things happened, I could say, I have a confidence that this was right. And there's a purpose for this, even though it's hard now. So that would be my advice for you. So, and if you're looking at, like, I just really encourage you, like, when you do this project, like the mission sending organization or church, like, I mean, you're all welcome to go and serve with WGM, and I would advocate that. And I'm going to present the information to you, but I would encourage you, don't blow that assignment off. Like, really look for an organization that you might serve with, an organization that you genuinely want to know more about, because in some ways we're going to compare it to WGM, because I'm going to be showing you kind of WGM side, and it's not that WGM is the only way to go. I mean, lots of KMC people have, and all the cool kids do. No.
Off topic, I thought we were supposed to have a quiz.
No, not in TESOL.
Well, I thought there was a quiz in this class too, but maybe it's not supposed to.
Quiz in this class is week 6.
That's good.
That's really good.
Am I wrong?
No, I believe you.
And thank you, Sam, for waiting until after the bell rang.
Yeah.
That probably-
You do have a quiz in TESOL
I
today.
know that. I thought I
Okay.
had both quizzes today.
I
No.
do.
Really? And maybe I misheard. Next
But I
week you have your
forgot.
3 portfolio entries. So next week there are discussion questions plus the 3 portfolio
Like on
entries.
Saturday. The portfolio due on Saturday.
The portfolio is due on Thursday,
Thursday.
the 17th, yeah.
Cool.
But quiz is week 6, quiz 1 in this class. I was like, really?
I was just confused.
No, and it's good. I'm still like developing these classes. And so, and obviously I'm easily distracted by life. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm preaching, but yeah, but thank you. And we'll have a quiz this afternoon.
You can forget about that one if you want.
It's so easy.
Sammy, do you agree?
Yeah.
It's so easy. You guys don't stress about it.
I figured it's gonna be a good quiz, but I'm not really good at those measures of my.
It's just, if you have, I mean, it's not, remember terminology and ideas.
That's the reason why I said, too bad you wasn't late to class, because I was gonna use it this study. That's the reason why I said that. I was gonna use, if you were gonna be late to class, I was gonna use it to study for the quiz. That was not existing.
I'm saying, did I say that we had it? Maybe I said earlier, maybe I got it mixed up in my mind, like we have a quiz. But it was, yeah, like week 6. So your portfolio is in there. So it's really interesting, the culture defining success. It's, if you compare the United States and Australia, like there are a lot of similarities, But in Australia, they've had a lot more drought and a lot more like challenges and stuff. And so like in America, if you have a farm and you're not successful, then it's like you didn't work hard enough. And the mindset in Australia is completely different. It's like, oh, you worked so hard. There are all these systems to help people who, like, welfare in America is like, oh, like you're no good. But in Australia, it's viewed as like, oh, you'll be sick, like next time, it's still success. You didn't fail. Like this is help so you can try again. And the view of trying is much more positive than here. Like here, if at first you don't succeed, try again. It's you're trying to succeed. In Australia, it's really the value is in the trying, not in the results. So it's really very interesting that you recognize that it's cultural.
Thank you, Suzanne.
No problem. Hey, and thank you for the
Great.
cucumbers.
You're welcome.
I ate one for breakfast. When you sent me the message, I really at first thought, like, I don't think you meant to send this to me. Like, it just seemed kind of random.
Yeah, I am
Like,
random.
it was like kind of in the middle of a conversation, almost like, do you like cucumbers and tomatoes? And I was just like,
Yeah, my
Oh,
parents were able to
didn't meant that.
meet me, or my mom was able to meet me, and she brought a whole bag, because we have so many that we're just having to give away. So most of those cucumbers were raised in my little garden,
oh, nice.
but, that tomato was not mine. I do not raise that type of tomato.
You say it with disdain.
Yeah, I don't like, yellow tomatoes. I don't like them.
Well,
That's the
thank
reason I
you.
gave it to you though.
Oh, no, I'm happy with it.
Yeah,
I'm very delighted.
I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you. Hey.